so I have the habit of holding low. This time I held too low." He looked at Jack High in coldly poisonous hatred. "I'll be sorry about that as long as I live." "And who else was in the car?" "The other two curs out of the same litter, Switchblade and Turkey Buzzard, over there." Further questioning revealed that Longfellow had had no direct knowledge of the pursuit or the siege of the jail in Bonneville. Colonel Hickok had taken personal command of that, and had left Longfellow behind to call the Solar League Embassy and the Rangers. He had made no attempt to move the body, but had left it lying in the driveway until the doctor and the Rangers arrived. Goodham went to the middle table and picked up a heavy automatic pistol. "I call the court's attention to this pistol. It's an 11mm automatic manufactured by the Colt Firearms Company of New Texas, a licensed subsidiary of the Colt Firearms Company of Terra." He handed it to Longfellow. "Do you know this pistol?" he asked. Longfellow was almost insulted by the question. Of course he knew his own pistol. He recited the serial number and pointed to the different scars and scratches on the weapon, telling how they had been acquired. "The court accepts that Mr. Longfellow knows his own weapon," Nelson said. "I assume that this is the weapon with which you claim to have shot Jack High, Abe Bonney?" It was, although Longfellow resented the qualification. "That's all. Your witness, Mr. Sidney," Goodham said. Sidney began an immediate attack. Questioning Longfellow's eyesight, intelligence, honesty, and integrity, he tried to show personal enmity toward the Bonnies. He implied that Longfellow had been conspiring with Cumshaw to bring about the conquest of New Texas by the Solar League. The verbal exchange became so heated that both witness and attorney had to be admonished repeatedly from the bench. But at no point did Sidney shake Longfellow from his one fundamental statement, that the Bonney brothers had shot Silas Cumshaw, and that he had shot Jack High Abe Bonney in the shoulder. When he was finished, I got up and took over. "Mr. Longfellow, you say that Mr. Thrombley answered the screen at the Solar League Embassy," I began. "You know Mr. Thrombley?" "Sure, Mr. Silk. He's been out at the ranch with Mr. Cumshaw a lot of times." "Well, beside yourself and Colonel Hickok and Mr. Cumshaw, and possibly Mr. Thrombley, who else knew that Mr. Cumshaw would be at the ranch at 10:30 on that morning?" Nobody. But the air car had obviously been waiting for Mr. Cumshaw. The Bonnies must have had advance knowledge. My questions made that point clear despite the obvious, and reluctantly court-sustained, objections from Mr. Sidney. "That would be all, Mr. Longfellow. Thank you. Any questions from anybody else?" There being none, Longfellow stepped down. It was then a few minutes before noon, so Judge Nelson recessed court for an hour and a half. In the afternoon, the surgeon who had treated Jack High Abe Bonney's wounded shoulder testified, identifying the bullet which had been extracted from Bonney's shoulder. A ballistics man from Ranger Crime Lab followed him to the stand and testified that it had been fired from Longfellow's Colt. Then Ranger Captain Nelson took the stand. His testimony was about what he had given me at the embassy, with the exception that the Bonnies' admission that they had shot Ambassador Cumshaw was ruled out as having been made under duress. However, Captain Nelson's testimony didn't need the confessions. The cover was stripped off the air car, and a couple of men with a power dolly dragged it out in front of the bench. The Ranger captain identified it as the car which he had found at the Bonneville jail. He went over it with an ultraviolet flashlight and showed where he had written his name and the date on it with fluorescent ink. The effects of the AA fire were plainly evident on it. Then the other shrouded object was unveiled and identified as the gun which had disabled the air car. Colonel Hickok identified the gun as the one with which he had fired on the air car. Finally, the ballistics expert was brought back to the stand again to link the two by means of fragments found in the car. Then Goodham brought Kettle-Belly Sam Bonney to the stand. The mayor of Bonneville was a man of 50 or so, short, partially bald, dressed in faded blue Levi's, a frayed white shirt, and a grease-spotted vest. There was absolutely no mystery about how he had acquired his nickname. He disgorged a cud of tobacco into a spittoon, took the oath with unctuous solemnity, then reloaded himself with another chew, and told his version of the attack on the jail. At about 10:45 on the day in question, he testified, he had been in his office, hard at work in the public service, when an air car, partially disabled by gunfire, had landed in the street outside, and the three defendants had rushed in, claiming sanctuary. From then on, the story flowed along smoothly, following the lines predicted by Captain Nelson and Perros. Of course, he had given the fugitives shelter. They had claimed to have been near to a political assassination and were in fear of their lives. Under Sidney's cross-examination and coaching, he poured out the story of Bonneville's wrongs at the hands of the reactionary landowners, and the atrocious behavior of the Hickok goon gang. Finally, after extracting the last drop of class-hatred venom out of him, Sidney turned him over to me. "How many men were inside the jail when the three defendants were claiming sanctuary?" I asked. He couldn't rightly say, maybe 4 or 5. "Closer 25, according to the Rangers. How many of them were prisoners in the jail?"
"Well, none. The prisoners was all turned out that morning. They was just common drunks, disorderly conduct cases, that kind of thing. We turned them out so's we could make some repairs."
"You turned them out because you expected to have to defend the jail, because you knew in advance that these three would be along claiming sanctuary, and that Colonel Hickok's ranch hands would be right on their heels, didn't you?" I demanded. It took a good 5 minutes before Sidney stopped shouting long enough for Judge Nelson to sustain the objection. "You knew these young men all their lives, I take it. What did you know about their financial circumstances, for instance?"
"Well, they've been ground down and kept poor by the big ranchers and the money guys."
"Then weren't you surprised to see them driving such an expensive air car?"
"I didn't know as it's such an expensive—"
He shut his mouth suddenly. "You know where they got the money to buy that car?" I pressed. Kettlebelly Sam didn't answer. "From the man who paid them to murder Ambassador Silas Cumshaw?" I kept pressing. "Do you know how much they were paid for that job? Do you know where the money came from? Do you know who the go-between was, and how much he got, and how much he kept for himself? Was it the same source that paid for that recent attempt on President Hutchinson's life?"
"I refuse to answer,"
the witness declared, trying to shove his chest out about half as far as his midriff.
"On the grounds that it might incriminate or degrade me."
"You can't degrade a Bonnie," a voice from the balcony put in. "So then," I replied to the voice, "what he means is, incriminate." I turned to the witness. "That will be all. Excused." As Bonnie left the stand and was led out the side door, Goodham addressed the bench.
"Now, Your Honor," he said, "I believe that the prosecution has succeeded in definitely establishing that these three defendants actually did fire the shot which, on April 22, 2193, deprived Silas Cumshaw of his life. We will now undertake to prove—" Followed a long succession of witnesses, each testifying to some public or private act of philanthropy, some noble trait of character. It was the sort of thing which the defense lawyer in the Whately case had been so willing to stipulate. Sidney, of course, tried to make it all out to be part of a sinister conspiracy to establish a Solar League fifth column on New Texas. Finally, the prosecution rested its case. I entertained Gail and her father at the embassy that evening. The street outside was crowded with New Texans, all of them on our side, shouting slogans like "Death to the Bonnies!" and "Vengeance for Cumshaw!" and "Annexation now!" Some of it was entirely spontaneous, too. The Hickocks, father and daughter, were given a tremendous ovation when they finally left, and followed to their hotel by cheering crowds. I saw one big banner lettered, "Don't let New Texas go to the dogs," and bearing a crude picture of a Zasroff.
I seem to recall having seen a